Good morning. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, very good. So good morning to everybody. It's nice to see you. I'm Pam Kingsbury, and I organize the event on behalf of the English department. So I want to thank you for coming to the UNA Writers Series, which has been sponsored by the English department for over 36 years, making us the longest running English Writers Series in the state. So yay us. We are underwritten this year by a grant from the Alabama Humanities Foundation, a grant from the Alabama State Council on the Arts, and our English department as well. Very generous support from our English department. We've also been certified as an Alabama 100 Bicentennial event by the Bicentennial Commission. Truth be told, I'd really like to thank everybody, past and present, who's ever been a part of the Writers Series. But this year I'd like to thank some people in particular. I'd like to thank the Writers Series Committee, which includes Jason McCall and Daryl Brown. Jason's sitting up front and Daryl's personing the door over there. And last year's committee included Anita Miller-Garner and Lisa Minor. They're Maritime members and they're sitting over here. I'd like to thank Dr. Burkhead, who's also sitting over here, and all the members of the English department who can raise their hands and be counted if they'd like. I'd like to thank our dean, Dr. Burkhalter. I'd like to thank Dr. Alexander, who's sitting over there. Amber Fight Morgan, who's with our executive council, is with him. I'd like to thank President and Mrs. Kitts for their continued response. It's always wonderful to see the faculty and students from Loretto High School, so clap and be counted back there. Show everybody where you are. Yay. We're happy to see you. Okay, so I think that covers all of my nuts and bolts for the day. If it's how many of you have been attending a reading for the first time? Okay, so let me tell you what you're supposed to do. You turn off your phone and you just be aware. Don't let anybody make you take notes. Just enjoy it, okay? Get lost in the moment. Yes, getting lost in the moment is a good thing. And we are aware that you have classes at noon, and so we will end before that. If anyone's attending for the first time and is an off-campus visitor and you receive a parking ticket, please send it to the English department. Those of you who are students are just out of luck. Sorry. Okay. There'll be a brief question and answer period at the end of the presentation, or you can go to the loft to the reception and book signing and ask questions there as well. When last year's Writers Series Committee, which as I mentioned included Anita Miller-Garner, started talking about what we wanted to do for this year, because this is Florence's bicentennial and it's the year leading up to Alabama's bicentennial, we were very aware of wanting to accomplish three things. One of them was We wanted an artist who had some roots in the state. We wanted somebody who was rooted in the state in one way or another. We wanted an artist who was devoted to civil rights. And we wanted someone whose collective body of work, which in Joy's case includes poetry, memoir, music, and the list would go on, continues to evolve. Joy Harjo, who currently holds the Chair of Excellence in Creative Writing at the University of Tennessee, was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She can trace her Muskogee Creek roots back to the Opelika, Auburn, Eufaula area of Alabama. She's the author of 8 collections of poetry, most recently Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. She's the author of a memoir, Crazy Brave, a children's book, The Good Luck Cat, and a coming-of-age adult book for a girl becoming. She's also working on several writing projects. She has 5 CDs of poetry and performs both nationally and internationally with her band, the Aerodynamics. She was here in 2009, and since then she's won, and not only these awards, but these are the major ones, the 2015 Wallace Stevens Award from the Academy of American Poets for proven mastery in the art of poetry, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and the 2017 Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize. And since I may never have a chance to introduce Joy at my alma mater, at my much beloved alma mater, let me say again, I'm going to say a couple of things that I feel it's important to say. Having a conversation with Joy Harjo, reading Joy Harjo, is a graduate course in what it means to be a human and to be a compassionate and loving human, what it means to be connected to both the natural world and the spiritual world, and what it means to connect prayer, myth, and family stories to create, and what it means to be one's best self in the midst of the chaos of modernity. Please join me in welcoming Joy Harjo to UNA.
Well, it's good to be back home. This is a home area of the Muskogee people. So I want to start with a song of acknowledgement, because these lands are still taken care of by the keepers. We're all the keepers ultimately of these lands because we're not separate from them, that we're part of it. If you look at the moon, if you look at the Earth from the moon, which is why that NASA image was so powerful and initiated a big shift towards world consciousness in the world. You see that we're all part of the Earth. We are the Earth. But we're still here. The keepers are still here. The original peoples, we're still here. We didn't disappear or die out. We have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, aunts, uncles. We're still here. This is a song taught me by my cousin Joe Sulphur, who keeps the songs. He's a keeper of the songs. And I said, I need a song when I go places that will say a song to share. And so he gave me this song. And I want to sing it because the people who take care of this place, I want them to hear our language. And I want you to hear the language and know that we're still alive and we're still here. And to say thank you, Mado, to those who take care of us and continue to take care of us and inspire us no matter what happens in this world. I know. All in all I know. All in all I know. All in all I know. It's need to kale. All in all I know. All in all I know. Oh bunny, oh bunny. All in all I know. All in all I know. Ajalugi mongongi. All I know. Hey yongi goli. So the song says we were brought here by the old ones, and they are always watching out for us, no matter time, no matter history. And then to be here in our homelands, we're here to celebrate life. Life is short, and we are put here to love and take care of each other because we are all human beings, no matter what the Popol Vuh said when they said that natives were not human beings so that the land could be taken. Most people don't know anything about this history at all. My husband, who is also of the Muskogee people, Hijiti, Owen Sapopa, is here, and we went for a trip down to all of these lands were part of the Muskogean lands, and we went farther south outside of what's now known as Columbus. And we drive all over and look up the stories, and we have stories we carry with us that you won't find in history books. And I remember thinking, I saw where one of my grandfathers, Sam Shakota, who was the first principal chief after removal, I saw where he had been trained. I saw a house that belonged to Patty Carr, who was one of my relatives. And he also had several houses. And then I think about my Aunt Lois and my grandmother who were painters, and my grandmother who played saxophone, and I wonder if anybody, I think for most of America, the history is kind of a foggy mess. And out of it, the Puritans emerged. And then we were all naked and running around here as heathen savages. And then enlightenment came in from the Europeans, and everything was put into order. That's not really how it happened. We're human beings just like you. We had houses, we had huge societies, we had mathematics, we still have, I shouldn't say had, because we're still here. Literature, most literature in the world is not written in the English language or European languages. All of that. We had houses there, and what happened with Andrew Jackson and his forces and others, they just came in and by guns, and there's a whole history of guns, and that's another whole performance about guns and the kinds of guns and what happens, and moved us out. And the thing about history is it can happen to you. That's the thing, it can happen, if it can happen to any of us. So we have to be on, maybe part of the point of all of this is that we're here now. And it's ultimately about love, or in our language, anagachka. And that we take care of each other, invite each other in to eat, share with each other. That's one of the main governing principles of the Muskogee people, is that when people came into our lands and talked to us and we made them part of us. They became our relatives. And I believe that the root of all teachings is that. Not make laws to exclude people or to treat others with hatred. And I want to start with a poem, that eagle poem, because we all have helpers. The animals, we all have animal helpers. It's not some kind of new age or native thing. It's a human thing, because we are connected. We're connected to the plants. We're connected to the animals, to the winds, to the elements. And they're here to help us. They will also harm us if we're doing harm to each other or to the world. And this is for Eagle Song, a song that came to me, inspired by them. And it basically says that we're all here for a very short time on this earth. And just remember who we are, where we came from, and that none of us were going to get there before the other. None of us were given the only teachings in the world, and everyone else is going to hell. We're all in this story together. To pray, you open your whole self, to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know that there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound but other circles of motion. Like eagle, that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle, rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty, in beauty. Okay. I think the next poem I'm going to read, I wanted to read New Orleans, but I don't have that poem up here. Does anybody have How We Became Human? Okay, cool. I'm going to do that. So I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we all have the story. Everybody has the story of their relatives and those lands the relatives come from. That's what DNA, that is what is encoded in the DNA, are the stories. And they're all there. And I was always aware of, and we talk about, with our people about where we come from. I heard stories about our grandfather Manahui or Manahua, or in this part of the world you call him Minowa, about his horse, and all kinds of stories that you won't find. But this poem came from the first time I went south into New Orleans, which was one of the crossing points for the Trail of Tears for the Muskogee Creek people. And there's history everywhere. It's all in you can walk through it. It's all in here right now in this place we're in for the Florence Bicentennial. All of it. So the history didn't begin with, I forget the guy's name who called this place, he loved Florence. He was an Italian. I think he helped with the building of this place. Because Florence is an incredible city. And he named it for that kind of beauty there. But then always left out are the story of the natives, the indigenous people, and the plants. That's part of the story. And the trees you have here, and so on. And the water. Sometimes I hear about the Tennessee River here, the singing, how the river sings. And then there's a story when you head over to the famed studios and into Muscle Shows, there's a story, too, of how our people, the Muskogee people, are part of the origin story of blues and jazz. Charlie Patton was also Choctaw. A lot of the people were also native. And you hear our traditional music, and there it is. So it's important. And people come up and say, well, what can I do? Just remember, who we are. This America, it starts with indigenous peoples. So I went south to New Orleans, and this is what I saw there. I was picking up the stories. This is the South. I look for evidence of other creeks, for remnants of voices, or for tobacco brown bones to come wandering down Conti Street, Royale, or Decatur. Near the French market, I see a blue horse caught frozen in stone in the middle of a square. Brought in by the Spanish on an endless ocean voyage, he became mad and crazy. They caught him in Blue Rock, said, "Don't talk, I know it wasn't just a horse that went crazy." Nearby is a shop with ivory and knives. There are red rocks. The man behind the counter has no idea that he is inside magic stones. He should find out before they destroy him. These things have memory, I have a memory. It swims deep in blood, a delta in the skin. It swims out of Oklahoma deep the Mississippi River. It carries my feet to these places, the French Quarter, the stale rooms, the sun behind thick and moist clouds, and I hear boats hauling themselves up and down the river. My spirit comes here to drink. My spirit comes here to drink. Blood is the undercurrent. There are voices buried in the Mississippi mud. There are ancestors and future children buried beneath the current stirred up by pleasure boats going up and down. There are stories here made of memory. I remember DeSoto. He's buried somewhere in this river, his bones sunk like the golden treasure he traveled half the earth to find. Came looking for gold cities, for shining streets of beaten gold to dance on with silk ladies. He should have stayed home. Creeks knew of him for miles before he came into town, dreamed of silver blades and crosses, and knew he was one of the ones who yearned for something his heart wasn't big enough to handle. And DeSoto thought it was gold. The Creeks lived in earth towns, not gold, spun children, not gold. That's not what DeSoto thought he wanted to see. The Creeks knew it and drowned him in the Mississippi River so he wouldn't have to drown himself. Maybe his body is what I am looking for evidence, to know in another way that my memory is alive. But he must have got away somehow, because I have seen New Orleans, the lace and silk buildings, trolley cars on beaten silver paths, graves that rise up out of soft earth in the rain, shops that sell black mammy dolls holding white babies. And I know I have seen DeSoto, having a drink on Bourbon Street, mad and crazy, dancing with a woman as gold as the river bottom. Okay. This next one is with our people. It's like the West Africans too. A rabbit is a trickster figure. You know, and a trickster is always getting into trouble. But his troubles become a fierce mirror to us human beings for the troubles we create in the world by not listening, by not being humble, by all the things that we humans contend with. And so this is a contemporary rabbit story. And you'll hear what I mean when I say it's contemporary. It's right now. It's a story we're all in together. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. That clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and Clayman felt important and powerful, and once that Clayman started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, well, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Then it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries, then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning of life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more, and Rabbit had no place left to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call the clay man back, but when the clay man wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he'd made a clay man with no ears. Okay. You know, I'm standing here and I just realized I'm supposed to be out there performing. I guess I'll stay here now that it's probably better in the middle, but I have all my stuff laid out here. So, let's see. Actually, I will move out there. This is better. Okay, there, this is a lot better. Should I start all over? No. The funny thing about laughter, it does lift everyone up. That's like songs. If we were to sing a song together, a song that we love, it lifts everybody up. And I like that about the traditional ways is that everybody becomes a relative. Or at the prayers in our circle, in our traditional tribal circle, you know, it's about everybody. We're all one people, ultimately. So this poem is called, This Morning I Pray for My Enemies. This morning I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. I'm going to read a few pieces from Crazy Brave, my memoir. I'm actually working on a new memoir. I don't have a name for it yet. It's a historical memoir, and you think, now, memoir is literally about memory. And you think, how can you write a historical memoir it's usually about one human's memory. So what is a historical memoir? But then I think about, again, the DNA spiral about how the memory of our ancestors are all part of us. I mean, where do our dreams come from? We don't just emerge from our mothers, from the father's love and the mother's love we come from, we're the result of their love and their dreams going way, way back, saying, okay, let's keep going. Let's figure out how to move through brutality, through massacre, through enslavement, let's figure out this next generation. We're going to keep moving. We're all carrying the story. Every one of us is carrying a story forward, and every one of us has something to do with what's going to happen next in the story. It's not an easy story here on Earth at all. This is not the vacation planet. And we all have stories about that. But anyway, this is my first memoir, Crazy Brave. And one thing for those of you who write or do anything with words, or anything you create, I guess even fixing a car, it's good to have another person on the team or running something by someone. And for when I revise, because I revise heavily, and I think most writers do, because you see it when somebody's carving or creating art. You can watch how the revision process works, or somebody is carving, you watch it. Well, writers do that too. You don't just write a poem and there it is, but sometimes you go through 50, 100 revisions. And that's the way it was with this book. It started out as a book I loved John Coltrane is one of my favorite artists in the world. A love supreme, a love supreme, a love supreme. That's my mantra. And I'm a horn player too, partly because of John Coltrane. And so my memoir was going instead of crazy brave, and that's what the word Harjo or Hajo means, so brave, you're crazy, it was going to be moments. We hold a lot of memory in songs. We hear a song and it takes us somewhere, or it takes us back to a first love or a last love, or I'm never going to be loved again. It takes us back to that kind of space. And so I thought it'd be cool to do a book of memory or memoirs with these songs. But then I remembered I used a song title in another book, and they charged me $150, and I thought this could get expensive because when they print, the publishers don't pay for those fees. I thought, well, and then I went to making it all short stories, and I had one that fit really nice out of memory, but then you realize none of our lives fit well into a short story. And I abandoned that. Anyway, it took me a long time. But at the last part of it, the very last part of it, I was helping my mother through the last bit of her cancer struggle and living in her sewing room, and I called Pam Kingsbury up, and I said, I emailed her, and I said, would you help me? Would you listen to the story? And for 3 nights she did, because that's how I hear things. And I could hear what wasn't working. Just to hear it out loud, that's another part of it. And so Pam, your beloved colleague, teacher, community member here, listened for 3 nights as I read Crazy Brave. So she's part of this memoir. So I thank Florence for that, for Pam, and all that she's done in a lot of ways. She was my student at University of New Mexico years ago. So anyway, this is one piece. This opens the book, and this really happened. I mean, in memory, some of it's visionary, but it tells the story of being a child. And I think somebody asked me what I learned on every project, and this is true whether you're in the sciences or humanities, or you're doing a dissertation or a thesis or, a project. There's always something that you learn that you didn't know before, otherwise why do it? And somebody asked me, what did you learn writing this? And I said, because I had to go back into childhood, I said, I learned that no matter what age you are in childhood or growing up, we know so much, even as a little infant, because I can remember being an infant, you're conscious. There's a consciousness. A lot of people think, well, they're small, they're not going to know anything. That's not true, and I think we all know that, is that children can be very wise. They know what's going on. You may not tell them, and it might make them a little crazy because they know, but they think they know that you think that they don't know, but it's but they're very wise. They have dreams, they have insights, they're quite incredible artists and naturally. So that's one thing I learned. So this was before I could speak. And I heard Miles Davis's horn. And this is what happened. Once I was so small I could barely see over the top of the back seat of the black Cadillac my father bought with his Indian oil money. He polished and tuned his car daily. I wanted to see everything. This was around the time I acquired language, when something happened that changed my relationship to the spin of the world. It changed even the way I looked at the sun. This suspended integer of time probably escaped ordinary notice in my parents' universe, which informed most of my vision in the ordinary world. They were still omnipresent gods. We were driving somewhere in Tulsa, the northern border of the Creek Nation. I don't know where we were going or where we had been, but I know the sun was boiling the asphalt. The car windows were open for any breeze. As I stood on tiptoes on the floorboard behind my father, a handsome guy who smelled of Old Spice, whose slick black hair was always impeccably groomed, his clothes perfectly creased and ironed. The radio was on. Even then, I loved the radio, jukeboxes, or any magic thing containing music. I wondered what signaled this moment, a loop of time, that on first glance could be any place in time. I became acutely aware of the line the jazz trumpeter was playing, a sound I later knew to be Miles Davis. I didn't know the words jazz or trumpet. I don't know how to say it, with what sounds or words, but in that confluence of hot southern afternoon and the breeze of aftershave and humidity, I followed that sound to the beginning, to the birth of sound. I was suspended in whirling stars. I grieved my parents' failings, which I saw stretch the length of that rhapsody. My rite of passage into the world of humanity occurred then through jazz. The music was a startling bridge between familiar and strange lands. I heard stomp dance shells singing. I saw suits, satin, fine hats. I heard workers singing in the fields. It was a way to speak beyond the confines of ordinary language. I still hear it. So this book wound up being, I wanted to start, the book took me 14 years to write. That's because I was trying to force it I wanted it to start where it starts, where it ends. I didn't want to go into all these other places. But when my editor said at Norton, we're calling it in, which is something you don't want to hear, like you've taken too long and you get the book in now, or that's it. And so then I told my spirit and the spirit of the book, I give up. And I just finally wrote this story because I'd been dancing around it. So this little page I'm going to read is, I took a lot of wrong turns and I wound up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the Cherokee capital, where my son's family was from, and wound up there as a teenage mother. Even though I had always had really high grades and was in one of the first all-native drama and dance troupe and went around the Northwest performing, and there I was. And what saved me was listening to, we all are the spirit, we're all really spirits, and your spirit, they talk to you. You have a path. Everybody has gifts that were brought in to take care of and to share. And I wasn't on the right path. And so they were talking to me. When I lived in Tahlequah, I used to walk through town, up and down hills, along the creek, by storefronts filled with items I had no money to buy. I walked when I was hugely pregnant, and then after my son was born. It was my time alone. As I walked, I could hear my abandoned dreams making a racket in my soul. They urged me out the door or up in the night so they could speak to me. They wanted form, line, story, and melody, and did not understand why I had made this unnecessary detour. Think for yourself, girl. Your people didn't walk all that way just so you could lay down their dreams. I wanted more, and I didn't know how I would get it. My days were consumed with the drudgery of survival. I took care of the household, made meals of beans, fried potatoes, and cheap meat. I negotiated with a husband who was essentially a boy. He didn't know how to grow up. His father had abandoned the family, and he had no father map. There were flashes of inspiration and joy. I saw my son sitting by the screen door making dirt parachutes. His fine baby hair lit by the sun, singing with the radio. And my stepdaughter in a striped jumper with balloons in honor of her 4th birthday, climbing up swings in a park. But this wasn't enough to sustain the need for artistic expression. I believe that if you do not answer the noise and urgency of your gifts, they will turn on you or drag you down with their immense sadness at being abandoned. And therein is the root for addiction, for craving, all of it, if we don't take care of what we've been given to take care of. I'm going to read this one. This is a new poem here. And recently, about 2 years ago, we moved to Knoxville. I got offered a position at University of Tennessee. And I told them during my interview that my grandfather, Manahui, had used to steal horses up there in Knoxville. They hired me anyway. But he actually got his warrior name from going up there, but it really wasn't stealing, because the way the people looked at it is that those were our lands. We were pushed off them, but they were our lands. And so those horses were, somebody had parked them on our property. But going there was, I know that first night we arrived, the room was filled with people, our people, some who were still there taking care of the place, and they hadn't seen us there in a while. And then for this historical memoir, I'm thinking, how in the world, where will I start with history? Where do I start? Where do any of us start in trying to, where do we start? How do we stop this violence with our children in the schools? Our children should be able to go to school and feel safe. And also know that, the stories they're getting are the stories that are genuine. But they have a safe place, that they know that they have a place that they can grow up and get the nourishment. There's mind nourishment, there's the nourishment of the emotions. All of that comes together when you can teach, and when you can really teach, and you're not bound by having to match scores in some kind of test, but you can really teach about what it means to be a human here all together. So it starts with that, and also in here is about watching the news. And I don't know, almost everybody saw those images of the twin baby girls who were killed in the bombing in Syria. And that stayed with me because it's a similar story everywhere. And then the poem goes to, and that's one reason I go to poetry, because I don't know where the poem is going. And it winds up, and I found out about something about my husband's and our grandparents, something that they did when the soldiers were lining us up and pulling us from our houses at gunpoint. And I learned something that I didn't learn, that I didn't know when I wrote this poem. How to write a poem in a time of war. You can't begin, and there's two voices in here. You can't begin just anywhere. It's a wreck. Shrapnel in the eye of a house, a row of houses. There's a rat scrambling from light with fleshy trash in its mouth. A baby strapped to its mother's back, cut loose. Soldiers crawl the city, the river, the town, the village, our bedroom, our kitchen. They eat everything or burn it. They kill what they cannot take. They rape what they cannot kill, they take. Rumors fall like rain, like bombs, like mother and father tears swallowed for restless peace. Like sunset slanting toward a moonless midnight, like a train blown free of its destination, like a seed fallen where there's no chance of trees or any place for birds to live. No, start here. deer appear from the edge of the woods. We used to see woodpeckers the size of the sun, redbirds, and were greeted by chickadees with their good morning songs. We'd started to cook outside, slippery with dew and laughter. All those smoky, sweet sunrises. We tried to pretend war wasn't going to happen. Though they began building their houses all around us and demanding more, they started teaching our children their God's story, a story in which we'd always be slaves. No, not here. You can't begin here. This is memory shredded because it is impossible to hold by words, even poetry. These memories were left here with the trees. The torn pocket of your daughter's hand-sewn dress, the sash, the lace, the baby's delicately beaded moccasins still connected to the foot, a young man's note of promise to his beloved. No, this is not the best place to begin. Everyone was asleep despite the distant bombs. Terror had become the familiar stranger. Our beloved twin girls curled up in their nightgowns next to their father and me. If we begin here, none of us will make it to the end of the poem. Someone has to make it out alive, sang a grandfather to his grandson, his granddaughter. Joy Harjo, Chazadi. Someone has to make it out alive, sang a grandfather to his grandson, his granddaughter, as he blew his most powerful song into the hearts of the children. There it would be hidden from the soldiers, who would take them miles, rivers, mountains from the naval court place of the origin story. He knew one day, far day, the grandchildren would return, generations later, over slick highways, constructed over old trails, through the walls of laws meant to hamper or destroy, over the libraries in the winds, carried in stones. His song brought us to his home, our place in these smoky hills. Yes, begin here. This next one is called Redbird Love. So one of the gifts of living in Knoxville are all of these birds around where we live. We live in a condo up on a hill. And it was a hill where Manahui used to come up and look out over the city. And then it was also a Civil War camp. And so there are a lot of layers of stories up there. And then the birds, they've watched everything through the generations, and the trees too. So it was spring, like right now, where they're already starting all of the mating rituals. And they get pretty intense for the birds too. And we have a group of turkeys, a family of turkeys that wanders around the property. And last spring, or about this time, 2 male turkeys, we couldn't get down the hill because they were in the road fighting over a female. And she was standing demurely over watching them, blinking her eyes, and the fighting was getting furious. Eventually they broke up. But anyway, we were watching this, and I've already watched the young ones coming up, and I'm watching them start the whole story all over again. And this is called Redbird Love. And it's about watching one of these bird love stories. And after I wrote the poem, I realized it's a love poem for my husband. We watched her grow up. She was the urgent chirper, fledgling flyer. And when spring rolled out its green, she'd grown into the most noticeable bird girl. Long-legged and just the right amount of blush tipping her wings, crest, and tail. And she knew it in the bird parade. We watched her strut. She owned her stuff. The males perked their armor, greased their wings, and flew skyloop missions to show off for her. In the end, there was only one. There's that one you circle back to for home. This morning, the young couple scavenged seeds on the patio. She is thickening with eggs.
Their minds are busy with sticks the perfect size, tufts of fluff like dandelion, and other pieces of soft. He steps aside for her so she can eat. Then we watch him fill his beak, walk tenderly to her and kiss her with seed. The sacred world lifts up its head to notice. We are double, triple blessed. I'm going to read a few more, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. But I don't promise any answers. That's what we're all trying to figure out here. And I wrote this one while I was waiting to be picked up. Just a minute. I need to get some water, please. And I want to say thank you to water. It's getting scarce. Fresh water is getting very scarce. The Muskogee word for thank you is mado. So mado to the water. I could share it if anybody else. I should be sharing it with everyone. So this poem came when I was waiting to be picked up somewhere up in the middle of Michigan. And I'm standing there, and it was equinox, and we're getting near equinox. And I was thinking about this story that we all carry. Sometimes it gets to be too much. Sometimes we don't want to think about this story, so we go to pharmaceutical drugs or other things to try to forget or to move through it, because the burden, and yet we can lay the burden down. And sunset is a good time to do that, because you're going with the natural. We're part of a natural ceremony. So at sunrise, it's scientific too. You can prove it. Light has a certain effect. The sun coming in, it hits the horizon. Sunrise. There's a lot of power in that moment. And in my life, I've noticed that the people who know things usually get up and are in that place and say prayers of thanksgiving, and also to help others and to ask for assistance as we all move together on this path toward understanding and anukechka, or compassion. And so it's a good time, and we're all part of that together. All of us, the animals, the all beings of the earth, and all humans. And then at sunset is the time of letting go. And I was standing there at sunset. If you were to stand, if we were all to remember, I try to remember, but I don't always, and stand there and say, okay, I let this go. I let go. I am so pissed off, so-and-so did such and such, let it go. Let it go. And then, I don't know how much longer. It's so hard to take care of my mother. It's so hard, and I've got kids at home, and I don't know, how can I do this? You ask for help and just let it go for a little bit. Let it go. Oh, I can't, why did the police kill my brother? There's a larger kind of understanding in some of those moments. There's understanding much larger than human. We don't know why we go through the things we do, but we go through them. We have to keep moving through them with love. No matter what happens, let it go. So this is about thinking about all of that stuff, which becomes a train wreck in my mind unless I find a way to move with it. I must keep from breaking into the story by force. If I do, I will find a war club in my hand, and the smoke of grief staggering toward the sun, your nation dead beside you. I keep walking away, though it has been an eternity, and from each drop of blood springs up sons and daughters and trees, a mountain of sorrows, of songs. I tell you this from the dusk of a small city in the north. not far from the birthplace of cars and industry. Geese are returning to mate, and crocuses have broken through the frozen earth. Soon they will come for me, and I will make my stand before the jury of destiny. Yes, I will answer in the clatter of the new world. I have broken my addiction to war and desire. Yes, I will reply, I have buried the dead and made songs of the blood, the marrow. Maybe I'll close with this one. I'm going to read it partly in the Muskogee language, and I ask those who know the language well and what to forgive me. But it's thinking about being from here in this part of the world and how the story's connected. It's not broken off. It is not broken. We're not some misty past, but there are real people with names. There are names for everybody, all of us. You see somebody on the street who's having a hard time, and they have a name. They have a story. Everybody has a story. Sometimes I've been surprised. I think there goes somebody who hates me for being who I am, and they sit down next to me and we start talking. There's a story. There's a connection. You make a connection when you're not like the clay man with no ears, but it's about listening. Ultimately, it's all about listening, not about texting and talking and taking selfies. It's about, you're not going to learn anything that way, but it's really about listening. And this is called Beyond, or Thlintlepetla. I'm going to read English. I'm going to just alternate. Beyond Thlintlepetla, beyond sunrise, there's a song we follow. Beyond clouds, traveling with rain humped on their backs, lightning in their fists. Asosa Thlintlepetla, Ahaloja, Howe, Filat, Oski, Ojagoriat, Moon, Adorayatan, Nogaftijant, Hoyanajov, Pum, Yehegara, Pohit, Ajakapis. Beyond the blue horizon where our ancestors appear bearing gifts wrapped in blankets woven with sun and strands of scarlet time. Zeta, Cheska, Hawatan, Thlintlepetla, Pum, Ajalagi, Imko, Ogata, Mon, Ajara, Hitlaga, Apalapajit, Esyogis. Beyond the footpaths we walk every day, from sunrise to kitchen to work to garden to play, to sunset to dark and back. Nene, Apaskaji, Thlintlepetla, Hasosa, Ogata, Hambara, Jago, Atotkada, Chapova, Agopunga, Moon, Hasalagat, Ogata, Nurjajit, Ogata, Haram, Tethlipa, Atlantis. Beyond where the baby sleeps, her breath a light mist of happiness, making a fine rainbow of becoming knowledgeable around us. Hopuriwa, Nojat, Thlintlepetla, Inhisagata, Champozi, Afutchki, Hayat, Nakithuat, Pofagin, Chalades. Beyond the children learning alphabets and numbers, bent over their sticks and dolls as they play war and family, grow human paths. Hopuitake, Ponaga, Iolanga, Kithlagat, Thlintlepetla, Talajujet, Este, Ahage, Sakopanagis, Hotle, Hayega, Chegahoyaget, Akobanagis, Impoyavekcha, Minoja, Jagis, beyond the grandmothers and grandfathers, their mothers and fathers, and in the marrow of their bones, to when that song was sung, we first traveled on. Ipuse, Prucha, Echka, Ifka, Monfone, Infoloa, Plintopetla, Inhadajeska, Boom, Yahegara, Yahegi, Obius. Beyond sunset, can you hear it? The shaking of shells, the drumming of feet, the singers singing, all of us, all at once. It's a laka, thunto petla, mak, mage, kat, pohechka, loja, soponogi, opanogi, yaheogi, onogi, erahanga, si, yahegarak, pohechka. How deep the voices of earth and sky, in the song of beyond, how deep we are. Igana, mon, sara, emo, panaga, in Yahej, gara, satgaras, Yahegara, Lintopetla, pomo, saki, ponayat, Yahegis. Thank you.
Okay. We realize some of you need to leave for classes, so we're going to take a break, and the people who need to leave can go. And then Joy Harjo will take questions in about 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.